I heard a stat recently, an average household that earns about 50k would actually still just start going to borrowing to stay afloat. That in mind, it's like, well, shit, we need to potentially do something. What can we do? Side hustle.
With the real world.
Welcome to Lean Whiskies and Empire Building episode 10. I'm back with Marcus and we are going to have a discussion today about side hustles. So we've recently done some PR work, a lot of work. It seems to be pretty vogue topic at the moment, I think, especially since lockdowns and everything else and impending economic doom. With the economy the way it is as well, it's hard. It's easy to see why people are a little bit concerned about their finances right now, when you've got the heat or eat kind of pandemic coming up. In terms of not people worried about. I actually read this in the newspaper the other day that they think some people have to make the sacrifice either between eating or heating their home. Well, I just say, well, maybe eat a bit more and build some fluff, but you won't need to eat. It gets some padding and insulation. In all seriousness, though, looking pretty dire potentially over the next 2 to 5 years, maybe even longer. And because of that reason, I think more people are thinking about fortifying, stabilising their income from a side hustle, a second job, or I say second job, or a separate kind of business that they build on the side. And we've done a fair few. I've done a fair few kind of articles, interviews, some coaching on how to do it. And I think people think, from the face value, it's a lot harder than it actually is to set up a side hustle, where I would argue the contrary. It's actually easier to set up a side hustle. It's harder to make a successful side hustle. And I think there's a few pitfalls that people make, and for the most part, people can make a few £100 extra a month quite happily if that's something they want to do, quite easily with a few extra hours a week. But the question is, how do we get there and how do we do it? How do we sustain it alongside of our main jobs, if you've got a main job? And, you know, all those kind of questions in between. How do you pick what you do? How do you scale it? How do you handle your taxes? All those kind of things. So
what do you think the main reason is then that people are kind of moving towards side hustles?
I think there's a couple of reasons actually, but I think the main one is, I think actually entrepreneurialism at the moment is actually very popular. I've seen a massive shift online with it's popular. Guys like Gary Vee. There's a few other ones, Ed Milet. There's Grant Cardone, there's a few big names online, that Alex Hormozy now, possibly, who have actually made it quite fashionable. So I think entrepreneurialism and kind of being your own boss, there's a few, I can't think of any names at the moment, I've seen a few females on TikTok as well specifically, that push really hard on, you know, having your own business, this, that and the other, and the empowerment of that. So I think one main reason has been a huge shift towards that. And secondly, I think people think about side hustles because I think barriers to entry of setting up your own business are now much lower. You've got the ability to set up an online store, a online service, a course, this, that and the other, effectively in a day.
Yeah.
So I think the fact that it's become more popular, and I think the fact that it's more accessible has made an increasing demand for side hustles.
Yeah, what do you think is driving that? Do you think it's kind of aspirations, like almost like a resurgence of the American dream kind of thing, or do you think it's more driven out of fear?
Social media massively, up until recently. That's why I think social media up until recently has been the main driver in that glass window effect. Right, you go online, everyone's got Lamborghinis, everyone's got massive homes, everyone's got the nicest Cartier bracelets and bags and shoes and whatever else. Yeah. And everyone's like, how do I get that? And then there's a load of people punting courses and the social media has been the biggest extension and kind of push on the American dream ever, right? I think because you're seeing so many people with so much, or apparently so much. I don't think there is any more wealth necessarily. I think there's a lot more showing off and potentially fake wealth in order to sell this American dream. But has that always been the case? Probably. There's only very few people actually. I think, yes, potentially wealth has shifted to a different type of or demographic of people that are making use of 21st century money-making wealth techniques. But I also think that it's more of a facade, and I think that in itself has driven a lot of people to want to do it. But recently, and we're talking very recently, impending doom has hit again. It looks like we're on the brink of, or not necessarily in, a very big recession. Interest rates are flying up. The pound has been crashing. There's fears of job losses. We're seeing inflation, especially in our age, at a high that we've not seen in our lifetimes before. We're at a generational high, and it's scaring the living hell out of a lot of people. Where I think, if let's say the average person, let's just say for argument's sake, I know it's probably less than this, but let's say the average person saves a few hundred quid a month after their bills, this, that, and the other, with just the utility and energy bills going up alone, and food prices from Brexit, and obviously all the Russian war, all those, everything that's kind of combined is now causing inflation to be, I don't know, they're quoting 7-8%. We're probably more like 15 plus in reality. And that is now people looking at their bills going, well, we're actually borrowing at the moment. I heard a stat recently, I'm not sure how true it is, but I think like an average household earns about 50k with a standard house, mortgages, that and the other, would actually still just start going to borrowing to stay afloat. So that in mind, it's like, well, shit, we need to potentially do something. What can we do? Side hustle could be the way out, because if your job's capped, you can't earn any more hours. Potential job losses. Work isn't, most jobs at the moment aren't handing out more hours at the moment because they're worried as well. Businesses are worried, so I think that's fueled it. Yeah. So I suppose the next question is, like, you and I talk about this a lot, is like, okay, how do I find a product or service to dive into?
Yeah. I think the big thing at the moment is attention, isn't it? Like, we're the sort of the social media age and generation it's an attention economy, and like attention is now the scarce resource, isn't it? It's like there's a reason that things with scarcity are so valuable, gold, oil, etc. Like historically, like all those things have just been like, we're digging it out of the ground. There's only so much of it. That's why this thing's worth so much. And now it's attention. It's like everyone's online. Everyone's vying for like the same eyes at the same time. I think that's why you see kind of most side hustles are kind of revolving around the digital side of things. There's very, very few people kind of going like, I don't know what, I'll start making cabinets in my kitchen or something to start selling. There's not many people doing that as a side. There are a few people doing it, and there are a few people doing well. But the people that are doing well off the back of that are because they've actually utilising digital marketing skills, which is kind of where I think we're going to see things go. And there is a need for it. There's actually a skills shortage in that particular area, I think, anyway. And we know that from trying to employ people in that field.
Yeah. So I think when you're picking a side hustle to go down, I mean, unless you have a particular propensity to build something like you said, or you have a particular product in mind that you can maybe get at a price or margin that is better than the current market rate, or there's a product out there that you feel that you can make better. So this is the thing. What I would always recommend, number one, when starting up a side hustle, is pick something you probably know inside and out. Typically, if you don't, even if you do, pick something that you already know has demand. Right, and I get this question all the time. It sounds really hypocritical. Why would you go into a saturated market? It makes no sense, Elliot. Well, I'm like, well, unless you have the prerequisite skills like you just said of being a fantastic marketer and advertiser and great at sales, which, let's be honest, most people aren't. They've been working in a job. This is a side hustle. Marketing hasn't been their forte. They haven't built their own business yet. So when you don't have a fantastic knowledge base of marketing, this, that, and the other, it's always best to start, in my opinion, with a product or service that you know already has demand. Because it already has demand. You don't have to create demand. Creating demand is very difficult, very expensive, because you have to educate people on the product or service that's new, and then try and convince them to part with their money when there's probably already alternatives out there, this, that, and the other. So very expensive, very difficult. And then from there, you would typically, in my opinion, try and add some form of value to that existing product or service. So you can just reiterate and sell the same stuff, but if you can find, let's say for example, it might be that you have been, shop in the market for, I don't know, some form of online service. It might be a course for something that you know inside and out, gardening, or this, I don't know why I was talking about gardening, right? But you felt that there was something missing within that you didn't quite get from it, or a product that you had that, a water bottle that maybe you thought didn't have something on it, or an app that it might have needed, or this, that, and the other that you thought you could improve, but it has a great demand, but you can add some value, then that might be worth looking into. That's something I would always advise people. And the reason I say go into something that already has demand, because there is execution risk and there is demand risk. So when you go into a market, and this is the kind of psychology that I have, when you are trying to set up your own product or service, if you know the market has a demand for this product or service, hypothetically speaking, we've picked something we know it's got demand. If you don't sell it, that is entirely on you and your execution of that thing. And you can always learn those skills to become better at it. So that I can only be held accountable for that. If I go into something where I've created a new app or something that's never been done before, a product that's never gone out before, if the demand isn't there, regardless, right, that's not necessarily my fault. That's the market didn't actually exist no matter how hard I tried to push it, which is a demand risk, which is way scarier, and should be something a demand risk should be something that you adopt way further into your entrepreneurial career, in my opinion.
I think that's one of the things that Alex Hallways he talks about quite a lot, isn't it? It's like find a starving market. There's a lot of marketers, advertisers that use that same sort of analogy, but it's that thing.
So I think if you're looking for looking for a product or service, pick something that's already in demand, something you can add value to, something that's easy, quick to set up as well in terms of cost. So, just set up a Shopify store or a WordPress website that you can learn quite quickly, something that you can get off the ground. If you're talking about massive logistics and importing stuff from abroad, this, that, and the other, you're talking about storage, understanding international transfers and dealing with different people in different languages and all the good fun that comes with the risk of then importing something from another country and not being correct when it arrives. Really big headache.
Do you think that's probably why services tend to be more popular than product-based side hustle?
Always, 100%, because your startup costs are so much lower. It's more of a knowledge base cost than an actual logistical cost.
Yeah.
So I would argue as well that actually, this is my advice for anyone trying to set up a side hustle. I would always err towards the side of an actual service base, because the actual logistics, for one, are really difficult with a product and service. The actual costs are way higher, and you still need to be just as knowledgeable to sell the bloody thing once you've got it. So you're adding an extra 2 steps onto a side hustle that you could potentially get going from a service. So should we talk about maybe a few ideas of services that people could kind of go into? Because I know that's a big question. It's like, what shall I do?
Yeah. It's very difficult to say, isn't it? It's like you say, if you're trying to sell a service, realistically, you need to be selling a skill. And if you're doing a practical skill as your day-to-day job, it's very difficult to then take elements of that and break it away in a sort of marketable service that you can then sell.
So I will just say this, and hope people don't take too much offence. People shouldn't have the arrogance to think they can set up a business without any skills or knowledge whatsoever.
Yeah.
Okay? That's like pretending you can go and get a job with no CV. It's arrogant and frankly narcissistic to be able to think that you could just do it. So the prerequisite to you being able to set up something like this is that you'd have some form of knowledge or experience in something, or at the very least you found an opening in a market that you think you can capitalize on, an arbitrage, where you think I bumped into a service or a product that I can add a tremendous amount of value to. In which case I would then probably advise hiring someone like a mentor to help you bring that to market if you have no clue what to do. And if you don't, you think, right, okay, I need to do a service, and you've got no skill set, not even a hobby, this, that, the other, that you feel that you could actually charge someone for it as well. By the way, people set up these services, and you're almost a crook if you're trying to sell something that you're not particularly effective in, right? You might be a fantastic marketer, in which case sell marketing skills. Whatever you are good at, the prerequisite here is you need to be good at something, really.
Yeah.
So don't be arrogant enough to think, okay, let's hypothetically say someone's got the skill set then, or they're good at something and they feel that they can actually monetize on it. What's the next steps?
What, in terms of practical steps?
Practical steps to get that thing to market. So we've identified, okay, we've got a skill set we're good at, or a product potentially we can add value to. Next steps, setting up a company, I suppose. So
Yeah, has to be, yeah.
first thing I would advise, actually, get an accountant. They'll advise whether or not you should be a sole trader or a limited company. It's always a must, because they're going to look at currently what you're paying in taxes, the best way to kind of, we'll talk about taxes in a little bit, but how to draw down any profits as and when you get to that point, how to expense anything, how to do things properly, because the last thing you want to be doing is starting to sell things and then have a tax bill or a fine because you didn't do things correctly.
Yeah.
And then also setting up a limited company. By the way, guys, I think I looked at the other day, on the gov.gov website, you can set up a limited company on your own for about 12 quid. And you can have that done pretty much the same day. You just need to have a bank account attached to it, which actually takes a lot longer than setting up a company now. So you can literally have, within a couple of days, a limited company set up, business bank account set up, an accountant, and you're ready to sell.
Yeah, it is simple.
Really simple. And from there, the next thing to do really is just sell. So I think Alex or Moses says this all the time, is like, learn how to, at the very least, just get a single transaction to happen. So people try and run before they can walk. And what you need to try and do is, with this product or service you've got, at least convince one person to do a trade with you where you sell that thing for money and just get it done. Even if you don't make a tremendous amount of money from it, it's psychologically gearing yourself up to step into the shoes of a business person.
Yeah, to be fair as well, you can probably do that before you even set up a limited company. It's just like your research stage for actually, in terms of finding out whether the market is actually there for your product or service.
Yeah, I would say for the most part, probably do it beforehand. But if you are fully committed to doing it, it's something you really want to do. It's so cheap to kind of get those things going anyway, you may as well do it. But I think more than anything, it's having the psychological effect of actually making that first transaction. And I still remember mine when I found my first sale on my I had a lighting company, and I read how to for dummies on Google AdWords, and I spent like a year setting this website up. I put magazines worth, it was so much work went into this website, and I ran the website and I got my first sale after about 2 weeks of the website being launched, and I was elated, I was over the moon. But it was the catalyst for me to be like, I can do it. Yeah. That was that mental thing of like, no, I can do it. So before you get too far down the line with trying to set everything up, just make that first transaction and solidify that this can be done mentally. You then have got that fortitude to be able to go forward and the confidence to be able to go forward and say, no, I can do this. I've made a sale, I'm ready to go. Yeah. So we've got business set up, we've got product or service that we know we're running. I suppose next thing is kind of, how do we scale this out? So a lot of people talk about maybe getting mentors and things like that. Do you, I'm a bit biased in this because I do mentor people in this space, but from your point of view, would you advise getting a mentor, or how would you go about setting this up?
I think I'm now reasonably biased in this field as well. I mean, but I've seen how effective they can be. I think it largely depends on what you want from a side hustle. I think it's whether you just want like a bit of pocket money and just to monetize something that you have a passion for, but you don't want it to become a job. You just want to, you're good at something, it's a marketable service that you could make money from, but you don't want it to become a job. I think less appropriate probably in that instance. I mean, you still would get benefits from it. There's probably be ways of like streamlining it and like someone advising you on how to not allow it to become a full-time thing, and keep that passion there for it. But then, if you were looking to actually scale your income off the back of it, then I think mentoring is probably the way to go. And not just any mentor as well. Like, this is kind of a whole other topic of conversation in terms of finding a good mentor. Yeah, so but it needs to be someone that is appropriate for what your goals are, really.
Yeah, so I would agree that the kind of more advanced you are, the probably the more appropriate it would be to have a mentor. I do think mentors are extremely important, even if you're doing it as a small side hustle, to make sure that you get the cheat codes and the hacks to get things moving as fast as humanly possible. And the good thing about mentors is there's a lot out there for different levels, and like you just alluded to there, that I think that I would advise anyone to find, even if it's not a paid for mentor, at the very least find someone else that you know, or ask around for anyone else that you know has done something similar to you, or if not the same, that can give you some guidance and advice, because it really will take a lot of that anxiety and stress away, and a lot of the major things that you could have really do with avoiding, which...
Yeah, I think it's one of those things as well. I think a lot of people are actually afraid to ask questions or ask for help, but you'd be amazed at like how many times you can just have a conversation with someone, ask them a few questions, and people would just flood you with information.
I think for the most part, people inherently are kind of like they have an ego, and it's always, people always like to show you what they know, and I've always leveraged that. I say always. I had a big competitive ego when I was younger, and wouldn't ask for help. But as of late, I like to leverage people's desire to tell me how good they are about something, and I will sit there and lap it all up, because if I can get free advice or even paid advice, I'm happy for it. But I think my definite advice here would be to find someone that can really give you some basic guidance at the very least to get things moving, even if there is something that is only going to be for a few £100 a month extra pocket money, or to help you with your support. And like you said, as and when you want to potentially take things up a big level, that's when you probably need to find more specific and advanced mentoring, and would highly recommend that. Plus it's a business expense as well, so it comes out of the company, which is talking of which, I've got to ask whether or not there's tax benefits to side hustles. And there is and there isn't. Like, you're not going to have a major tax kind of advantage from starting your side hustle. So let's say that in this scenario that you've got a 9 to 5 and you set something up on the side, you would speak to your accountant. By the way, I can't give financial advice. So from my experience, what you would do is probably pay yourself in dividends if you have a limited company set up, which means that dividends are taxed differently to PAYE or even your self-assessment, and they're at a lower rate. So you can get an extra pound earned at work versus an extra pound earned in your side hustle would actually be less taxed as a dividend payout than it would be for another pound at work. I'm generalising here because it all depends on the numbers. You've then also got the ability to expense. So if you work from home or have a home working office, you'd have to chat to your accountant again. But in my scenario, because I do a lot of work from home, as a percentage of the household utilities, I can expense some things through. So maybe it might be that I claim 20% of my broadband or my heating bills because I'm working from home for a certain period of time. Side hustle dependent, how many hours you work would all change these figures, so you have to speak to your accountant. But there is benefits there. And you can buy certain things through the company, like laptops and phones and all these kind of things, which you couldn't do if you just work. So that's a great thing. So moving on, we've got everything set. We're moving. We're kind of like we're on the roll now. We're making a few sales here and there. When would be a good point, do you think? And I know this is person dependent, to leave your full-time job for a side hustle?
It depends how unhappy you are in your job, really, doesn't it? Yeah, like you say, I think it's very personal dependent, but you kind of need to look at finances. The reason I think most people are starting a side hustle is financial, isn't it? It's like you're not earning enough money, so it's weighing up the pros and cons as to whether or not you can afford to take that leap, because you're probably going to take a bit of a hit.
I'd also say for me, it's like kind of risk profiles. So, and your ethical side of this. So not ethical, your kind of moral side of this. So for example, if you are a single woman who's 22 living at home with their parents, maybe paying a little bit of rent, your risk of going bust has far less consequences attached to it, potentially, than a single mum with 2 dependent children, and she's renting, and her going out, leaving her full-time job in pursuit of a side hustle could be far riskier. Could, by the way, and I've helped mentor a lot of people in that same position that have done that in a really responsible way. So with that in mind, my kind of, and this is because it's person dependent, my kind of little risk profile I would weigh up is, okay, how much would I need to be earning to replace my full-time income with the responsibilities I have financially at this moment in time? Then I would also look at what are worst case scenarios as well in a particular instance. So if this was all to go wrong, would I have that job to step back into? Do I have any savings? You know, all these things need to be taken responsibly as an adult, potentially, like, into this equation. Some people might want to have also, and I would always advise this, if you have the ability to set up a relatively successful side hustle in conjunction with your 9 to 5, I would advise running that side hustle longer than is necessarily desirable in conjunction with your 9 to 5 to make sure you have track record. Because it's all well and good having a month's worth of like successful period, but as I know as an entrepreneur who's run my own businesses since day dot, that there's ups and downs with this and financial volatility.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main benefits that a mentor can bring to the table. If you're looking, I think, to transition from side hustle into a full-time self-employed, working yourself, this is your business and your life now. Having someone that's been where you are, taken that leap, has probably mentored other people to do the same. Like, they're going to be able to help you through and tell you when is probably the right time or goals to hit before you consider doing it.
So as someone being relatively responsible, what I would always say is like, well, give yourself 6 months to a year in a profitable situation before you even consider leaving that job. Because what happens is you might run 1 or 2 months and you're killing it. And you think, right, I'm actually financially able to leave my main job now. Yeah. But as I said, from a track record perspective, I would always advise maybe seeing it out for 6 months or 12 months, even though it's horrible and you don't want to be doing it. Yeah. Because you're like, I don't want to be doing my 9 to 5 anymore because this is now what I want to do. But from a safety and risk perspective, and I'm actually not particularly risk averse, I'm happy to take risk, but I would still advise people to go through a bit of volatility and make sure that you can handle stress. When I say stress, I mean financial stress and business stress. You need to stress test the business. Yeah. And to do that, you need time. You can't have a pattern or a track record over 1 or 2 months. It just simply isn't enough to basically bet the... But that being said, if you are a low risk person, i.e. there's not, and this is personally dependent, this is take this as you want. If you are someone that doesn't necessarily have a massive fallout should everything not work out, and you're still at your mum's house, you know, you've still got a roof over your head and there's no dependents, and you really hate your job, sod it, go for it. Like, why not?
Yeah,
but
I think some people, I think, respond like really well with that, like burning like fire of pressure underneath. It's like, you have to do it, otherwise you're screwed. Some people deal really well with that, other people just fall to bits. So, yeah, I think you do really need to, like you say, have that testing phase and be able to understand how you respond to pressure.
Absolutely, and like I said, this is completely person dependent, so hopefully this gives you a bit of a framework to figure out your own kind of solution or game plan. Another question I've got was, do you need to tell work about your side hustle? And I would also add to that, is it morally okay to have a side hustle alongside work?
Yeah, that's quite an interesting question, really, because if there's an obvious conflict of interests, but you're going ahead with it anyway, that's where the sort of morality behind it gets a bit skewed. It's because, I mean, let's be fair, you're not going to tell your employer if you're doing something that you know is conflicting with their interests. Don't tell them. If you want it to remain a side hustle and not a very quick full-time job, don't tell them. But then I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier. I think if you have a bit of a passion project on the side, it's not conflicting with your full-time interests, and there's no reason why you shouldn't tell your boss and speak to them and probably even get like a bit of help and advice from them. They like from an employer's standpoint as well. It might just be that they're like, oh bloody hell, I didn't realise that you're like this focused and this ambitious and like willing to push and drive yourself. And it might be that then actually career opportunities can open off the back of it. What do you think?
I absolutely agree, and I think the skill sets that you actually learn setting up your own business can actually bring about tremendous opportunities in terms of promotion within your workplace, especially if you move into the marketing side and you understand how consumption works. There's a tremendous amount of upside there. And the only time I would say that there's like a real issue is like, one, if you're directly trying to poach potential market share from the company you're working with, or incidentally, it hinders your ability to work because you're absolutely smashing yourself and you're doing stuff in and around working hours. And I say this from a place of being someone that employs people. So I'm looking at this from the other foot as well. So I've done both. Like, I've not actually worked for someone else, but I've kind of set up my own side hustles and turned them into my own businesses and now employ a lot of people. How would I feel about my employees doing work outside of the job that I have associated? And I've always, because I am this way inclined and I am someone that completely empathizes with people that want to go and do that, as an employer, as a boss, I want to have my staff as fulfilled as possible. So actually, I'm very supportive of the fact that they want to do it, and I'd really rather they told me about it so I can help them do it in a responsible manner and also help them with it, like as you said. And I think it's super important that you do actually have this conversation with your boss, because there's nothing worse than it looking like you've done it behind their back. There's nothing illegal about you doing this, by the way, unless you've signed a contract to say otherwise. But providing it's no different to a hobby. So they don't say you can't go and play football at the weekend, do they? Yeah. It's only if it was to interact with your ability to perform at your best. And in my opinion, if someone's happier, more fulfilled, more upskilled, they're going to be a better employee anyway. Mm-hmm. So I actually think it's actually a bonus if done in the right way. Yeah, completely. I suppose the last thing then is like scaling these side hustles and really like taking them to the next level. When does a side hustle become like the thing? Like, when do you decide that it's going to be the thing for you? Is there a tipping point at this is going to be a full-on business, or does it stay as a side hustle?
It's a very difficult one to answer, isn't it? I think it depends on, it's like all these things, and it's such a cop-out answer, but it always depends on the person, depends on their goals, depends on their current situation. Because it's like you say, like if you're like an 18, 19, 20-year-old that is, I don't know, let's be very stereotypical. So you're working in McDonald's, like you got a bit of money coming in and you're just setting up your own little business on the side. Like that can become your full-time thing very quickly. Yep. But let's say you're earning 100 grand a year, you're in a job that you absolutely hate, it's killing your soul, but you want to go and become a landscape gardener. Like, you could start doing, let's say, like very extremes here, but you could start gardening for people on the side, start building that. It depends on, you're probably never going to be able to turn that side hustle into a full-time business if your goal is to increase your financial viability. Mm-hmm. If you're looking to let's say regain work-life balance, you kind of have to weigh up the pros and cons of each.
Absolutely.
And it's hard.
Do you think side hustles are going to continue to grow in popularity, or do you think they're going to shrink?
I can see it being a bit of a bubble, personally. I think that, as you were saying earlier, kind of the entrepreneurial world and the whole kind of like hustle mentality, I think is a trend that I don't think is going to last very long. I think with how turbulent the sort of financial world is at the moment, I think people want stability. And I think it's much scarier to be responsible for your own finances and your own future and your own security than it is to rely on someone else for that. And I also think as well, people are very reluctant to take responsibility for their own lives as well.
Okay, but keep it in the remit of a side hustle where you've still got your main income.
Even with that, I think it will die out. Yeah,
I think, and just to be totally honest with everyone watching this, running a side hustle is always going to be harder than you think it is. Mm-hmm. And I think because it is vogue at the moment, it is fashionable. I think there's a lot of people attempting it. It's harder than, it's simple to set up and it's simple to run. To do extremely well out of it, it's hard. As with anything that's worth having in life, it's difficult. Otherwise, everyone will be doing it and be very successful at it. So this is why I also think it's important that you talked about the word passion project as well. Would really be good to pull something, especially if it's going to be a side hustle. You may as well enjoy doing it.
Definitely.
And I think side hustles as a whole are never going to die out, but I do definitely think that they're going to fall in popularity, because I think as more people try it and fail, or potentially try it and it not be what they thought it was. There's a lot of work that goes into it, because you've got to run social media accounts, marketing, product logistics, taxes, company accounts, potentially hiring, outsourcing, all these kind of things that come into play alongside you doing another job, your full-time job. Unless you really enjoy it, which I do, and a lot of people that I work with absolutely love running their side hustle. And I would advocate anyone that's even thinking about trying it to at least give it a go, because there is a way of doing it with low risk. The whole point of a side hustle is on the side, and treat it more like a hobby to begin with. I think this is a really good idea, is that not to go in to start with, unless you really want to turn this thing into a full business and kind of that become the thing. Start off with it as a hobby. Do it out of the enjoyment of doing it and see if you actually enjoy it enough to then pursue it to that next level. And I think that in itself will really give you an indicator of whether or not it's right for you, because it isn't right for everyone. There is a volatility to it. There is sometimes risks associated with it. Sometimes you do have to borrow money depending on which route you go down. And it could also take away time that you have allocated to your other business. Hopefully it doesn't, but you know, it's going to be taking up your free time. So I am an advocate of it. I'm an entrepreneur. I love people that want to do it and would really kind of hope everyone goes down that route. But I do also need to be a realist and know that, you know, it's not right for everyone. And a lot of people just like stability, especially in the turbulent economic times we have currently and will continue to unfold over the next however many years. But I think it can be used extremely well as in your arsenal of tools to be able to fortify you against this period, and also give you the confidence, should you be successful in your endeavor in becoming a solopreneur or a side hustler, that you then have the ability to create your own income should you lose your current job as well, because there's also diversification there too, where if you have got a bit of money on the side and you do unfortunately run into the problem of your job no longer being available anymore due to, you know, contraction in that company or that market, you've then got that confidence that you can either create an income because you've done it before, you're doing it currently, and also that stability and support from the finances that then gives you, which then can also give you a lot more mental, you know, happiness and fulfillment in, you know, knowing that maybe you are a little bit more stable, because it is going to be a scary time for everyone. And I don't think this will ever stop having this cycle of, you know, people, once a recession goes, there will be another one. So it's kind of like, okay, well, we need something forever. And this is something that could be forever and could also assist you, as we've said above, in your current job role. So very admirable for people that do want to do it. I think it shouldn't be taken too lightheartedly, but do start it as a hobby. There's tons of benefits. And, you know, is there anything else you think you need added to that?
It's been pretty thorough.
It's been pretty thorough. Any questions outside of this, or anything that you've got with your side hustle you've got or thinking about starting, then I'm always available. Please leave a comment below. Whatever platform you're listening on. You can also find me on my social medias and drop me a DM. I'm always available. Until next time.
Peace.